Hey guys, it's Dr. McLean. And I want you to take a minute today, whether it's right now or later in the day, and pause and really reflect on your life and think about everything that you're doing. And let me explain to you what I mean by this. One example for myself, when I was involved with this one chiropractic group for many years, I learned this routine that to get yourself prepared before you see patients every day, this routine that all these very successful chiropractors were using. And so I started utilizing it. I literally used it for years and years. And one day I literally just stopped and I thought, you know what, this isn't really working for me. It's not achieving the result that I want to achieve. Now, it wasn't a bad routine. It worked for these other chiropractors, but it just was not working for me. But I did it for years because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. Another thing I did for many years was to work out first thing in the morning. Now, physiologically, I do think that's the best time to work out for your body. But when I started thinking about it one day, and I thought, you know, when I wake up first thing in the morning, my brain is really ready to go. And I like to work on certain projects and complete things, and my mind is just ready to go. And then I find during the middle of the day, my mind really needs a break, but physically I'm more ready to go. So it would make a lot more sense for me personally to get up first thing in the morning and work on projects and study and read and things like that, and then move my workout to the middle part of the day. And I started trying that, and it worked much better for me. So my whole point is when you look at your life and the things that you're doing, are you getting the return on your investment of your time? You know, so our health, in my opinion, is our most important asset because you can't do anything if you don't have your health. But right along with that is your time. You know, you can lose all your money and make your money back. You can lose things, material things, but you can't get your time back. Right? Go ask somebody that's on their deathbed. They want to get that time back. So you want to make sure you're investing your time in the things that you want to do and that are productive for you. And a lot of times, you know, we do things that we've always done, or we do it the way we've always done it because we've got into this rut. My dad one time, I remember we were eating supper, my dad eat really, really fast. I mean, he would wolf his whole meal down and the rest of us would be like halfway through our meal. And I asked him one day, well, why do you eat so fast? And he had to think about it for a second, but he remembered working on a farm when he was a kid and he'd be out working in the field and the tractor would come out and bring their lunches out. And they only had like 5 or 10 minutes to eat. And if they didn't finish their lunch, they were out of luck. And so he learned to eat very, very quick so they could get back to work. And he had still been doing that, you know, many, many, many years later, even though he only did that for a summer or two. So really just take a look at your life and make sure you're doing the things that are working for you and to do things that are important to you, not because they've always been done or somebody else taught you that way. Now, it's good to try different things, experiment with different things because, you know, for myself, I tried working out towards the middle part of the day and it worked much better for me. But if it didn't work, I could always go back to my old routine. You know, actually just this past week, I've totally switched up my workout to my workout routine. Now, if it's not working for me, I can always go back to the way I was doing it before. But test some different things out. And again, invest your time in what's important to you. Hey guys, it's Dr. McLean, and when I was about 20 years old, I decided to go skydiving, which is one of the neatest experiences I've ever had in my life. And you go through about a 6-hour course, and they learn how to do all the things, play your backup chute, do all these different things. And I was doing what's called a static line jump. So if you can imagine, picture this. We're in this tiny little plane. It's a Cessna 172. It's a high wing plane. It has these struts that come up that support the wing. They took out all the seats of the plane, so there's just the driver's seat, the pilot's seat. Otherwise, you're sitting on the ground of this plane. You've got your backpack on, your parachute, and when it's time to jump, you know, you're 4,000 feet up in the air. You look down, there's just you know, cars are just tiny, houses are just tiny, and they open the door and this wind comes rushing in. I mean, just one of the scariest moments of my life. Then you're told to climb out of the wing. So you literally climb out of this plane. You're hanging by the strut of the wing. You know, you look like Superman. Your feet are out in the air. You're hanging by this wing, and you look back at your instructor, and they say, go. And then you let go, and you free fall for about 4 or 5 seconds. Your what's called a static line, your line is actually attached to the plane, so it deploys your chute for you. But when you're falling, it feels like you're going to fall forever. You don't know if your chute's going to open or not, even though it's probably going to. So you get this huge adrenaline rush, and then you get to control your own chute. You're going to fly all the way down and land. So I had this just amazing adrenaline rush. I just felt so amazing. The next week I was just on this natural high, and I went back right the next week again and flew again, or did the skydive again. And the second time, even though it was just amazing, I didn't get that same adrenaline rush. And this is where sometimes people get addicted to things like cocaine and heroin because they're always chasing that first rush that they had and they can never quite achieve it. So the reason I started thinking about this is I started thinking about my emotions and our emotions today in our society and how we really try to avoid these negative emotions. We've labeled things like sadness and depression and anxiety as these diseases. And sometimes I understand people get clinically depressed or some serious cases, but we treat it like such a negative thing. And so my point is that when I wanted to go back and skydive the next week because I wanted to achieve that positive emotion again, I just enjoyed it so much. So I want you to really think about, and I've been thinking about this myself, is when we have these emotions, why are we have these emotions? Because I'm as guilty as anybody else. I want to avoid the negative emotions. So we bury our heads in Facebook or watch YouTube videos or TV, or we go out and have a glass of wine or beer and we try to avoid these emotions. But we can use these things as positive things. So if you're depressed or anxious, you want to really ask yourself why, and what can you do to move forward? Because if we just get in this state of comfort, we do things just to constantly avoid this, we can never move forward in life. So the good thing about these emotions, we have depression or sadness, it gives us contrast to really appreciate the high moments. You can never be happy if you've never been sad. You can't ever have that contrast in emotion. So really think about where you're at with these emotions, and they fluctuate all the way throughout the day, but obviously if you're stuck into one emotion for a period of time, really take a minute and examine yourself and go, okay, what can I do to use this emotion to drive myself forward in a positive way? Hey guys, it's Dr. McLean. And I remember being in, I think it was 6th grade, and for the summer trip that year, my dad decided we're going to go to Canada, but it was just myself and my dad and his friend and his son. So there's 4 of us. And my dad was a private pilot growing up, so I flew a lot in planes. And we decided we were going to take the plane up there. So my dad was flying, he was the pilot, and his friend Jerry was also a pilot as well, so he was in the co-pilot seat. And we took off and everything's going fine. Pretty soon we started hitting some bad weather. And I was actually sitting on a cooler, so I didn't even have a seatbelt on. We're getting thrown around in these little planes. If you had a pocket, the plane would drop, and I mean several times I remember hitting my head on the ceiling and vomiting. Now I grew up in small planes. I never vomited in planes before. This is how bad it was. So as we're coming into this one airport, we had to land, and we're coming in, and there was such a bad crosswind that the wind's blowing this way, the plane's gonna get blown off of the runway if you don't turn. So my dad's coming in, and my dad's flying. He's got the plane turned like this at an angle as he flies in, so it doesn't get blown off course. We're getting closer and closer to the runway, and my dad's friend Jerry's saying, "Dwayne, get the wing up. Dwayne, get the wing up." And his voice is going louder and louder every time he does this. My dad's not even responding. He's just cool as a cucumber. He goes in, and it was so close. I was sure. I'm looking out the window, look at this wing, and it looks like it's going to touch the ground. I just thought any second we're going to crash and die. And right at the very last second, he turned and we landed perfectly, well, as perfect as you can in that wind. And we walked into the airport, and all the people that were there working there, it was a small airport, but there were several people there, and they looked at us like we were ghosts. They were just amazed that we had flown in this weather, and there was no planes going in or out of this airport because the weather was so bad. So we sat there for a while, we looked at the weather reports, and we had a connecting flight to catch up in Canada. We're going on a flying fishing trip, so there's a float plane that we're going to fly us in. So we had to be up there by a certain point if we wanted to make this plane. Well, they decided we were going to fly. We were really going to risk our life. I thought we were going to die for sure. So we took off, only plane that left the airport that day. We did make it to Canada, but when we got up there, the funny thing is that the planes couldn't fly up there because the weather was so bad. So my point is that a very unnecessary risk for a small benefit of being able to fish. So I started thinking about that in our culture today. A lot of people don't realize, though, the statistics are that 1 out of 2 people are dying from heart disease, 1 out of 3 people are dying from cancer. So that's what, if you do what the average American does, you have this very high risk just walking around. If you sit at a computer, drive a car, do all the things that the average American does, but then you don't get your spine adjusted, that's the risk. Now, I'm not saying if you get your spine adjusted, you're never going to get heart disease or cancer, but the research clearly shows that your risks go down dramatically. So know what the risks are and mitigate those things by taking care of your spine. But if you've got a spouse at home, if you have kids at home that haven't got their spine adjusted, please bring them into the office and find out what's going on. Don't wait until you get into the situation, a scary situation like that we are in a plane, and take an unnecessary risk. Hey guys, Dr. McLean. So let me share with you a funny story. Not so funny for my wife, but funny for me. We've had all three of our kids at home with a midwife. And our most recent addition, Jasper, he's going to be 4 in just about a month here. When my wife went into labor, and we had been through this twice before, so it was kind of old hat for us. We knew the drill, so to speak. And my wife called me. I was here at the office on, I think it was a Tuesday afternoon. It's like 5 o'clock in the evening. And she called me and she said, very calmly, said, hey, I think I'm going into labor. I'm going to call the midwife, and so if you want to start heading home. So I was just kind of finishing up the office, and I said, well, okay, we're having a baby tonight. I'm probably not going to be back for a couple of days. I got to get some things finished here. So spent a little time finishing some things. I was driving home, got to get some gas, so I got some gas. Make a long story short, it took me about another hour before I got home. Now, my in-laws had come to help us when the baby was delivered, so I assumed that my in-laws were at the house. And so I got to the house about an hour later, assuming that my wife was just maybe going into labor. And I walk in, and she's got her hands on the kitchen counter, she's bent over, and she turns to me, and literally smoke's come out of her ears, her eyes are red, and she's like, where have you been? And so in that short amount of time, she went into full labor, and the midwife wasn't there yet. She had to come from Great Falls. And our other 2 children, my wife had 12, 15-hour labor, so we were expecting a kind of an all-night affair, so to speak. So when I got there, she was in deep, deep labor, and she was not happy. And she said, I've had 2 kids at home. I want to go to the hospital. I want drugs. I'm in pain. And she was, again, in deep labor at this point, and she was thinking to herself, I'm in this much pain now. I can't endure this for another 12 or 15 hours. But we had discussed this ahead of time, knowing that she didn't want to do drugs. We didn't want to do drugs unless it was a crisis or emergency situation. So just kind of kept beating around the bush, and I said, well, let me call the midwife and see where she's at. My wife is not happy with me. So the midwife said, well, I'm on my way, I'm almost there. So she gets there, and I said, just to warn you, she's not happy. She wants to go to the hospital. And this had happened with her other kids too, but she was, again, in more pain this time. And so the midwife said, oh, okay, well, let me check her. And she said, oh, you're going to have this baby within an hour. And I became very scared, not for my wife, not so much for me, but for the midwife, because I'm thinking to myself, if my wife doesn't have this baby within the next hour, she's going to kill the midwife. And fortunately, the midwife was right on within 45 minutes or an hour. Jasper delivered, everything went amazing. But the reason I'm telling you this story is that we had a philosophy, and we still have a philosophy in terms of our health, is that the body is self-healing and self-regulating, which is also the chiropractic philosophy. Your body doesn't need any help. It just needs no interference. So that was our philosophy. So in that situation where my wife wanted to go to the hospital, again, if there was an emergency or crisis situation, we definitely would have done that. But when she was in that pain, she didn't really want that. She would have been regretted that, I guess, after the fact. So my point is, for yourself, I'm not telling you what your philosophy should be for your health, but you should have a philosophy for every area of your life, but specifically with your health. So if you get sick, if you're not feeling well, maybe you're not going to make as good a decision, or if you're in pain, as if you're in a normal state, so to speak. So we can make bad decisions. We're in the height of the situation, but if you have that philosophy to stick to, then you can use that to guide your decision. So if you get sick, you can think, well, I could take an antibiotic, but if I believe my body's self-healing, self-regulating, if this is not an emergency or crisis situation, is that going to help or hinder my body's ability to heal? And you can go by that philosophy. And there's not necessarily a cut and dry answer to every situation, obviously, but you can use that philosophy to guide you. So I really think about that in terms of your health and how you make your healthier decisions, because even the small ones can add up to be big issues in the future, good or bad. So if you have questions on that, please let us know. I'll be happy to try to help you with that. Hey guys, it's Dr. McLean. I was thinking about recently, I was reading this book, and they're talking about stories and the stories that we tell ourselves, or at least the meaning we attach to those stories. I had a friend that when he was growing up, his dad wasn't around. His mom was a single mom. She had to work really hard. They grew up really poor. And he said for many years he was angry, he was mad at his dad. And then as he got to be an adult, though, he started to realize, my dad was not successful, he was not responsible, and if he would have been around, I probably would have learned those skills. He said, instead, I grew up with a single mom that was very hardworking, taught me that you had to work hard to achieve your results and that you could achieve anything that you wanted. And this friend of mine, he grew up to be very successful. I mean, multi-millionaire, 10,000 square foot mansion on a lake, Lamborghini, married, kids, I mean, the whole 9 yards. And of course, I'm sure he had his challenges, but really had a pretty amazing life. But he said, one of the things that shifted is when he changed that meaning to that and said, stop being angry at his dad and said, thank God my dad left and I grew up with my mom single. So he changed the meaning. The story didn't change, it's the meaning that he attached to it. So I had here recently, I was thinking about myself, and we had a couple of batteries stolen out of our RV, which was frustrating. It was mad. And then, reality is that's something to be mad about, but I'm going on throughout my day and I'm brooding about it, I'm mad about it, and I thought, how can I change the meaning attached to this story? And I thought, well, maybe those batteries were defective and they were gonna short out and cause a fire, shock somebody, and they got stolen. In fact, that saved us from that tragedy, so to speak. Or maybe I started thinking about the person that actually stole it, how desperate they must have been to steal both these batteries. Not an easy thing, those batteries are pretty heavy. So I started feeling empathy for the situation. So how did that help me? Well, instead of going around for days and weeks and talking to everybody about it and how mad and angry I was, because that's not beneficial to me, I changed that story and I just kind of let it go. So think about yourself and what meaning that you've attached to the stories that you've told yourself. Maybe you're saying, boy, the reason I'm not achieving this certain area of my life is because my parents got divorced or I got a divorce or whatever. Or maybe you've got divorced and you've attached the meaning that you're a failure in relationships because that happened. And that's the meaning that you've attached to it. Or that you failed in a business or failed at something. Failed meaning your meaning of that. That's the meaning that you've attached to it. So go back to those stories, the big ones in your life, and say, how can I switch the meaning of this? If somebody wronged you in the past, like, boy, that person really did this and it was their fault and I can't believe it, I'm really mad about it. And go back and really examine the situation and say, well, how can I switch the meaning? Well, thank goodness that this person did this situation, like my friend's dad leaving. Thank goodness this person did this situation, because now in hindsight I can see the lesson that I've learned and how that's serving me today. So the cool thing is you can rewrite the meaning. You can't necessarily change your history, but you can change the meaning that you've attached in your head and say, boy, how can I turn this around? And it might take you a little while thinking about that to examine that and go, how can I turn this into a positive thing? And how can I switch the meaning attached to it? But it's very powerful if you can do that, and it will serve you well in your life going forward. Hey guys, it's Dr. McLean, and I want to talk to you today about investment versus cost when it comes to not only healthcare, but to your time as well. And sometimes I hear people say, well, I don't have time to work out, or I can't afford to buy healthy food, or chiropractic care is too expensive. So let's look at investment versus cost. So when you look at your time, I've been exercising pretty regularly now for 20 plus years. And I think of all the time I've spent working out that I could have been doing other things. But I look at it as an investment because I know when I work out, my blood pressure goes down, it burns off stress hormones, my joints work better, I feel better, I sleep better, my energy's better. So that half hour, how much time I'm giving up to work out, but what I get for that, increased energy, increased longevity, and that I'm actually feeling better as I get older, to me that's worth it a million times over for the return I'm going to get on my investment. If I can avoid something like a heart attack, obviously that saves me a lot of time being in the hospital, going through an unnecessary cost, and my quality of life the rest of my life. Now, we can't guarantee that if you exercise, but we know that the risk goes down. Versus if instead of working out, it's a double negative if I would have spent that time sitting on the couch, because we know that increases atrophy, it increases inflammation, it makes me weaker over time. So what are you going to do with that time that you're not working out, for example, in this scenario? But you also have to make sure that it's effective. You can go to the gym and read a magazine and just kind of plod away on the treadmill and not really get your heart rate up and things like that. So you got to make sure it's effective. So if you invest your money in the stock market, for example, and you got to really look at this return on. I'm not a stock market expert by any means, but the stock market goes up and down, up and down, up and down, and by the time you retire, it's back to where it was when it started. Plus, you paid all the fees to your stockbroker. You would have made some money, but maybe you would have made more money if you just invest that in some simple interest-bearing account. So you have to make sure that it's effective. Now, when it comes to chiropractic care, I've seen nothing more effective than as far as a return on investment, what you get. All the studies show, there's work comp studies, there have been studies just on senior citizens. Every single time that the costs are dramatically different as far as how much you save by getting adjusted. Not how much it may cost you, but how much return you actually save money over time, not only on healthcare, but drug costs, avoiding hospital visits, avoiding surgery, all the things that we want to stay away from, avoiding disease. And again, there's no guarantees with chiropractic, but your risk goes down dramatically. Just like if you invest some money, you can't guarantee you're going to get a return, but if you do some of the right things, there's a good chance over time that that's going to compound and go up. So you want to make sure that you're investing your time, investing in your health with your money as well, but make sure it's effective. And like I said, there's some great things out there, other products and things like that, but I've seen nothing. When you compare the research, nothing more effective in terms of your return on investment as your chiropractic care. Hey guys, Dr. McLean. I want to give you a simple thing that you can do if you're trying to make changes in your food choices, if you're trying to lose weight or trying to improve your nutrition. A couple really simple things that you can do, and you've probably heard a lot about in the future here or lately in terms of mindfulness and using our mind the right way, being more in tune with ourselves and with our environment. So something very simple you can do in food is, number one is when you're going to sit down and have a meal, is to try to eliminate the distractions. Turn off the phone, turn off the TV. If I'm home at lunch by myself, I have a hard time doing this. I want to do a million different things at once. So, turn off the phone, the TV, just focus on your food. If you want to have some music playing or something like that, but otherwise just focus and enjoy your food. That's number one. Number two is going to go kind of along with this as far as being more mindful. And I'll tell you why these are important in just a minute, but is to smell your food. And this, my wife always laughs at me if I put my food right up to my nose and smell it, is that we have, I think it's 6 tastes, bitter, sweet, sour, there's 6 different tastes, but they estimate we have anywhere from 10,000, so the first research I saw, we have over 10,000 different smells that we can identify, but then I just saw an article here recently that says now they think we can identify over 1 trillion different smells. So our sense of smell is much more powerful when it comes to food. And you know this, if you're stuffed up and you try to eat food, it doesn't taste very good. You're losing that sensation. So by taking that time and take that spoonful of food and literally put it right up to your nose and smell it, or this is why they have you smell wine when you drink it, to get that full experience, so to speak. But by doing this, makes you more mindful, and you'll find there's certain foods maybe that you're eating, especially the processed and packaged foods, when you actually take the time to smell it, it's not going to taste as good. You're going to get more feedback from your brain saying, hey, this might not be as healthy for you, and you're not going to desire that food as much. You'll also find better feedback. So as you're starting to get full, your body's going to give you more feedback. You're more in tune with what's going on versus being distracted by all these different things, and next thing you know, you've overate. So you want to eat until you're full, but again, we have these distractions, we're not getting that good feedback. So even if your goal is, let's say, to lose weight, if all you did was just focus on those couple of things, you'd be more in tune with your food, and almost unconsciously you'll start to make better food decisions on how much you eat, but also the types of food that you're eating and what you'll be attracted to in terms of what tastes good to you. So fruits and vegetables that maybe don't taste as good to you right now, as you start to be more mindful of those things, they're going to start to taste better. That's been my experience. So try those things out. Take some time to smell your food, and when you first start to do it, you may not have as good of feedback. You maybe have lost some of that sense of smell. I know that was true with myself. And the more you start to do it, you'll start to develop that sense. So try it out. I'd love to hear your feedback on it. Hey guys, it's Dr. McLean, and I just got done working out and I started thinking about consistency. And I wrote an email about this last week, but many years ago I just was getting done with chiropractic school and I decided to run a marathon. And at the time I was lifting weights, I was strong, but I really didn't have any type of cardio shape. And I really had no idea how to run. I had never done any type of distance running before, so I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. But I signed up and I told some people I was going to do it, and they were kind of rolled their eyes. So I said, man, I'm really going to do it now. So I remember the first time I had to run, and I only had to run like 2 miles, and it was a run walk. So I'd run like 100 yards and then I'd walk 100 yards, and then run 100 yards and walk 100 yards, or something along those lines. I had a 6-month training schedule. And I remember It was snowing, it was cold, it was the end of December when I ran my first run. And I remember thinking to myself, there's absolutely no way I can do this. I don't think I can even run 3 miles, let alone 26.2 miles for a marathon. But I didn't want to look like a quitter, so I was committed and I started to do it. And week after week, I just followed the training schedule. I ran exactly what it said to run on my training schedule. And after 3 or 4 weeks, I could run 3 miles. It was still hard, but I could run it. And then after 6 or 7 weeks, I could run 7 miles. And it was still hard, but 3 miles was now easy. And then I got to the point where I could run 10 or 15 miles. And then 7 miles was easy. I can remember actually one day running, and I ran 7 miles and I actually sprinted. I ran 7-minute miles for 7 minutes. I was just amazed at how much my body had progressed. And ended up completing the marathon, but it just taught me that lesson, that's consistency. Now, I'm getting back into running now. So many of you know about a year and a half ago, I broke my hip. And when I got done off of crutches, I couldn't even walk without limping, let alone do a squat or any type of running. So I decided just to prove to myself that I wanted to get back into running. I want to be able to run 3 miles without stopping. And so I started here a little while back, and I would run 4 or 5 minutes on the treadmill, and that was hard. And I worked up to doing 7 minutes. Now I'm doing about 10 minutes, and in fact, just last week I ran my first time outside, ran a full mile, and my goal is to get up to 3 miles. So my goal is with you my point is with you is that we a lot of times overestimate what we can do in the short term, and we underestimate what we can do in the long term. And we see somebody that's in really good shape on an internet video, or we see a friend that's in really good shape, and we decide that we're going to do that. But in our brain, we don't really understand the long-term commitment. And because we don't see the results that we want to see quick enough, mentally we give up first. So the key is consistency. You don't have to put in a lot of time. You can get in tremendous shape over time if you just consistently do it over time. So you can start with as little as 10 minutes per day, 15 minutes per day. You can start with just a short walk. And it doesn't have to be just fitness. I mean, any skill or anything that you want to develop. The key is just being consistency. So you've got to track it and stay consistent with it. And over time, you'll just see tremendous results. So that marathon training really taught me that lesson of just being consistent. Doesn't take a lot each day. It's just a little bit, but being consistent. Hey guys, Dr. McLean. Take a minute and talk to you about ergonomics. And this is a big trend now in the, especially in the corporate setting and the office setting of getting a very good ergonomic setup for your desk. For example, we have standing desks, we have different heights for our monitors, we have these very expensive chairs. You can buy $600,000 office chair. And I think all those things are beneficial, but it comes down to not so much the environment, but our bodies. And we're not designed to sit or even stand in one position for long periods of time. I understand that's necessary for a lot of people for their jobs, and even certain aspects of my job, I'm forced to be in one position for a while working on the computer, different things like that. But here's what you have to understand is if your body, especially your spine, is limited in its motion, let's say if you have a limited neck motion, you can't turn your spine as much as you're supposed to, and you've got a perfect ergonomic setup, and you go to sit there, your body, let's say if your neck doesn't move as well, is still going to shift forward. So it doesn't matter how expensive a chair you have or how perfect the ergonomic setup is, it's your body. You've got to get your body to be able to adapt to that environment as well. So the best thing you can do, number one, is getting your spine adjusted. When your spine is moving the right way, that's the foundation for the rest of your body, the anchor points for your muscles and your movement. So if you're limited motion in your spine, it's going to affect everything else. In fact, I remember reading a really interesting case study when I was in chiropractic school. They had this gentleman that was born with no limbs, but he had essentially stumps for his legs. So he could still walk upright, or I guess waddle would probably be better terminology. He could kind of waddle on these stumps. But what they did, and I can't remember what the purpose of the study was, but they put a cervical collar on. So you see people in an ambulance, they get in a car accident, sometimes they'll put these collars on their neck so they can't move their neck in case there was a fracture. Well, they put a cervical collar on him, and now instead of being able to waddle on these stumps, he could not move at all. Now, in our case, if we have limited range of motion, if we put a cervical collar on, we have these longer limbs, so we may not even notice that it's affecting our gait or our movement, but it does. So it gives you a visualization of how much the motion of our spine affects those things. So we might have tight hamstrings or tight muscles because of our spine restriction. So the most important thing, number one, getting your spine adjusted. The second thing is moving throughout your day. Again, we're not designed to be in one position, so make sure you're taking breaks. I recommend about every 20 minutes. And if all you did was get up from your chair or your desk and you did 5 squats, that's the best thing you can do, that movement into gravity. But any movement that you can do is beneficial, but you want to do it on a regular basis. You don't want to sit all morning long and then you get up 10 times in the afternoon. That's great for the afternoon, but you miss that morning. It's the accumulation over time. So yes, use a great ergonomic setup, use a great desk, use a great chair, use a good standing desk if you have those things. Those are great tools, but much more importantly is moving your body. That's a million times more important than the most expensive ergonomic setup that you can get. Hey guys, it's Dr. McLean, and the other day I was looking at my kids and I was thinking about my kids and how much different their upbringing is compared to what I was in terms of sickness and health. And some of you have heard my story, but when I was growing up as a kid, I was sick a lot. I mean, I was sick more often than I was well. Ear infections, sore throats, strep throat, constantly had canker sores, had no energy. And as I started to get older, progress through school, I remember thinking, I started to look at my dad, for example, who was very successful in business. He came from nothing and made himself very, very successful. And I saw the people that he hung around with that were successful, and they all had high energy. They were intelligent for the most part. And I started to think about myself and this internal struggle I had about, I want to be successful. I want to be like my dad. And I didn't feel like I could do that because my energy was so low. No matter what I did, I was really struggling in school. I didn't feel like I was an intelligent person because these things are going on. Now, I didn't recognize this till many years later. But I was sick a lot. I was missing school. And I just, as I started to get older, thinking, I'm not going to be able to achieve this level of success because I don't have this health. And I felt like I was working really hard and not achieving the things that I needed to achieve. Now, as time went on, I progressed through school. I did make it into college and started working my way through college. And I remember just hitting this wall and just being so frustrated. I was working so hard just to get mediocre grades, and the people around me that I knew weren't necessarily smarter than me. They weren't having to put in the effort to achieve these things. I said, that's it. I'm going to fix this. And so I started exercising an hour and a half, 2 hours a day. I was eating a very, very strict diet. And I got a little bit better shape. I got a little more muscular, but I was still sick all the time. I still had this very, very low energy. And so I stumbled on chiropractic. I said, I'm going to go be a chiropractor. I didn't really have any idea what it was about. I just thought it was about back pain. I had no idea it was anything to do with my health. And as I started to go through chiropractic school and I started to get my spine adjusted, I finally started to get some healing. And what I learned is that the body's self-healing and self-regulating. I thought about when I was growing up. My sisters, my parents, they were never getting sick. So if it was a germ causing a sickness, how could I was the only one getting sick? We were breathing the same air, eating the same food, yet they were never getting sick. And so I found the body's self-healing, self-regulating. So I got so excited about it. But then as I started working through my internships, I started to find that 98% of chiropractors work just on pain. All the chiropractors work with were back pain and neck pain. They didn't help people like me. So I researched out and I found a chiropractor that did this, and I learned the corrective techniques, and I've studied them since. And I found myself, my life has dramatically changed every area of my life. And the things that I didn't think I'd be able to achieve before, I can now achieve because I have the energy, and I have achieved because I have the energy and the health. And my health is actually getting better each year. I'm not losing my health like I expected to, even though I was so sick as a kid. So please think about those people out there that maybe they don't have back pain and neck pain, but they've got health issues, or maybe they don't have health issues yet, but they're developing those things. They just don't know it yet. And please spread the word about chiropractic, because you'll be able to literally change your life. I wouldn't have had to gone through this 20 plus years of struggle if I would have known what I known then. And again, there's just a very small percentage of chiropractors that do what we do. There's some great chiropractors out there, but it's a small percentage at what we do. So we'd love to be able to reach out and help your friends and family. And so please let us know what we can do to help them. Hey guys, it's Dr. McLean. When I was a kid, a lot of times, a lot of summers, we would take trips up to Canada to go on fishing trips. My dad really enjoyed fishing, and we'd go on these amazing fishing trips. And I just always amazed my dad at this amazing sense of direction. So, this is long before GPSs, but you get in this boat You start to drive these lakes up in northern Canada where, to me, all the islands look the same. You pass one island, another island, 10, 15 minutes you were away from your cabin or your tent, and you're out in the middle of nowhere. I couldn't get us back to save our life. So I was always amazed. We could fish all day long. My dad would know the exact same route back. We'd always make it back to our cabin or our tent. Well, as I got older, I remember I was in college and my dad called me and said, hey, we're gonna take a trip this summer. Would you like to come with? And I said, yeah, that'd be great. So in the meantime though, my dad had heart surgery. And I've heard this from a lot of different people, is that when you get a heart surgery, it changes that person mentally a lot of times. And so it definitely had changed my dad, but I didn't realize that this at the time. So we went out fishing and we're out all day long, and we turn around and start to head home, and my dad can't quite remember the directions. So I'm starting to get nervous. It's starting to get dark. We don't have any, we've got rain gear, but we don't have any type of gear to spend the night out in the woods. And of course, this is Canada. It's summertime, but it gets pretty cold at night. So my dad kind of finally figured out. We made it back to camp. It was a huge relief. I was pretty stressed at the time. So my point is that I never learned myself how to read the maps or pay attention where we're going, because I always relied on my dad taking care of that. He'd always done that. So I started thinking about this today, and where do we give up our responsibility? I think about our healthcare system. And so many times we just rely on our insurance companies to tell us what to do, or medical doctors. We just assume that they know all the answers. And of course, they're human, they're fallible. So my point is that to over the years, if I would have just paid attention every time we went out fishing, I probably would have developed that skill, and I could have learned how to read the islands and read the maps and figure out how to get us back to where we needed to go. But I didn't. I just left that responsibility to my dad. So when you go in, remember, your health is your responsibility. So it doesn't mean you have to be a doctor to learn all the information, but be a little bit proactive so that when you get in a situation, at least know what questions to ask. So if you're going in for a physical, look at, for what your age is, what are the common tests that they do? And so you have a little knowledge when you go in there and ask the doctor, well, why should I do this test? How's the benefits? Number one, it might save you some money, but it literally could save your life. When I look at things like mammograms and colonoscopies, when you look at the research, the benefits, based on their research, do not outweigh the risks. There's risk with all these procedures. So you have to make the best decision for you, but look at the cost versus benefit and ask some questions. Why would I do this particular test? Why would we not do this particular test? You're armed a little bit. So don't give all your responsibility. I love in this office why people ask questions. This is why we do these videos, why we do the newsletters, do the handouts. You guys don't pay extra for that information. It's to arm you so you can be in charge of your health and be able to ask the right questions. Hey guys, Dr. McLean. Just happened to be listening to a story on the news this morning. I thought it was very interesting. And they were talking about, it was down south, like Arkansas or Missouri, and this particular noxious weed, I think it was called pigweed. I'd never heard of it before. And how these farmers, I think they were cotton farmers, were using this particular chemical from Monsanto to kill off this noxious weed, this pigweed. And the chemical had worked really well for years. Now, I don't believe in using these chemicals, but for their situation, as far as from the farmer's perspective, these chemicals had worked very well for years as far as killing off the noxious weed, but still allowing their plants to grow so they could sell them for the product. But over time, what happened is that the plant adapted to this chemical, or that the noxious weed, I should say, adapted to this chemical, and the chemical no longer killed the weed off. And I thought that was pretty amazing, because you have a man-made, very, very harsh chemical that if we ingested it just straight, it probably would kill us. But over time, this plant adapted to this chemical, and now they're in the exact same situation they were before, but in a worse situation. So that's Mother Nature, and we have the power in our bodies, this innate, inborn intelligence that allows us to adapt to all situations. So first of all, recognize that when we have a symptom or a disease or an issue, the body's adapting for that situation. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't do something about it. But first recognize that if you've got high blood pressure, there's a reason that blood pressure is high. It's not from a lack of blood pressure medications or if you have high cholesterol. So you've got to make the best decision for your situation, but just keep in mind the body's always going to adapt. So if you have high blood pressure, you take a blood pressure medication, the blood pressure is going to come down based on the research from that medication, but your body had brought that blood pressure up in the first place. So now over time it's going to adapt and try to figure out why some artificial chemical is trying to bring that down. or if you use an antibiotic to kill off a bacteria that wasn't supposed to be there, then your body doesn't get the strength to develop the immune system over time. So there's always going to be a ramification. So again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't take action in certain situations, or we shouldn't use medications in certain situations, but keep in mind that the body is always going to adapt. It's always doing the best thing it can for you. It's trying to protect you and keep you alive. So when we have a symptom, don't just assume there's something wrong. Ask yourself, what might be right with this situation? Why is my body adapting the right way? And at least approach it from that perspective, and it might make you consider a different option or different decision in terms of regaining your health or overcoming that particular symptom or challenge.